All right, it's Matthew Mickey here, and we are going to do our wargaming for October 15th, Wednesday. And so, starting off with candle science, right? Like, based off of what Monday did and Tuesday did, the open, high, low, close, because that's what the candle does, is it takes those 2 days, or if we did the 12-hour, the 4-hour, whatever, it doesn't matter. It takes the last two candles, what it did from an open, high, low, close, and then it gives you the probability for the third day, right? So, as we look at this, right, I already put the inputs in of what Monday and Tuesday has done. We get a 77% probability of being bullish. And then as things start happening today, we'll continue to update these prices, right? So let's go and see what the probabilities say, right? So the probabilities have a 69% probability that we get above previous day high and a 77% probability that we close below previous day high, meaning 1615 closes below this high, right? There's a 54% probability that we close below previous day Globex open. And then there's a 62% probability that we are going to close above previous day settlement, right? There's a 69% probability that we do not take out previous day low, right? So that's our range. That's the probabilities from a daily standpoint. As of right now, right, we're below NMP Friday's range. We're above previous month 50%. So we know there's no statistical edge. 50% of the green candles will be red, 50% will be green. Unlike when we're above NMP Friday and previous month 50%, we get 70% green candles, 30% reds, meaning that lower day statistically happens at 1800, 03, 930, 1030, and the high of the day happens between 1400, 1500, 1600 in the day, right? And then 30% of the days are red, right? So now we're going to move on to the daily profile, which we use to see based off what Asia did, based off of what London did, what we're going to expect and put probabilities on New York 1. We use different things like time-based probabilities, midnight open, settlement, Globex open, structure-based probabilities, previous day mid, high, and low, previous 12-hour high, low, mid, and then we use projection probabilities, which is off of Asia, right? And we can put probabilities on it, right? So right now, this is the 730 to 830 box, right? This is known as the fixed constant for New York 1. We're waiting for it to break out of one side. So there's four possible scenarios. It can go short and not hit the other side of this. It can go long, not hit the other side of it. That would be considered true. Or it can go long and then come to the other side of this range, which would be a long false, or it can go short and hit the other side of this range, which would be a short false, right? So right now, looking at what the overnights did, we can see that Asia and London both were in agreement that we wanted to go higher, right? Short false, meaning we took out the Asia fixed constant and we ended higher. We took out the London fixed constant, ended higher, and now we're just waiting for New York 1 to do what it's supposed to do. Now, when we have overnight going trend, it leaves a lot of these probabilities open, right? And so, two of the probabilities that we focus on is the midpoint of London, which we call the London OU. It could be known as like the midpoint or the halfway point or whatever you want to call it, the halfback, the CE, whatever you want to call it, right? And then the Asia OU. And so coming over to the daily profile, which remember candle science is for OHLC no matter what the time frame, right? We can go all the way down to the M45, but we have every other time frame you can think of. We got all the assets, right? Daily profile is from a variable standpoint. So looking at London, that OU, there's an 85% probability that it's broken, and Asia is a 92. Another level that we look at when we have trend to the upside to see if we're going to come down, retrace for ICT based traders or structure based traders, is like the internal liquidity or the retracement, like whatever you want to say. We are looking. We can see that we also use the P12 mid, right? P12 mid, the high and the low of previous 12-hour, and what probability sequencing that comes off of that, right? All right, So we can see, because we have not broken out of either side of this range, we're going to start wargaming what the possible scenarios would look like. So if New York won, the first thing that stands out to us is that London does have a higher probability and Asia has a higher probability of getting hit. But from a time aspect, that Asia drops off and then London has a secondary mode right here between 9:30 and 9:45, right? If we go short falls, and then real quick, looking at previous 12-hour, you can see there's an 88% probability that P12 mid gets hit. The P12 high has already been hit. So there's the next lower target from the 12-hour is that mid, and we can see that the secondary mode happens between 9:30 to 9:45, right? Um, yeah. So before we go on to the war game, and let's look at settlement, right? So we have the ability to look at those time-based probabilities, and based off of what Asia and London does it have anomaly? The one thing that's standing out to me right now is that they all have normal midnight, Globex Open, and settlement have normal probabilities. This is the normal range for probabilities for those three. But the thing that's standing out to me is that the mode for each one of them is at 9:30 to 10 o'clock, right? Coming over and pressing this on Wednesday, we can see that the 25, 50, 75, and 100% level, based off of what Asia London has done, has an increase of going 75% of the settlement filled, right, is 89% probability. And then, just by day of the week, we can see it's a 75. If we just select all, we can see that the probabilities don't shift all that much, right? So now let's do some wargaming, right? Now we're going to say there's 4 possible scenarios that New York 1 can do around that 7:30 to 8:30 box, and that's what we're trying to get at, right? And trying to figure out. Now, once it breaks up to the upside or the downside, and it looks like it's going to go breaking up, so we're going to do that probability first, right? We're going to say that if New York 1 goes long, meaning it breaks out of the 7:30 to 8:30 range to the upside first, right? Looking at these probabilities, we can see that London time from 9:30 to 10:30 increased, right? Um, Asia did not, right? So that tells us clear as day, if we break out of this box to the upside, right, there's more likely to come and engage with and bounce off of this London OU and this P12 mid, than to come all the way down and touch, Asia OU, right? And that Asia OU still has a high probability, just from a time standpoint, it's not correct. It's not like high from the time standpoint that we're in, right? We can see that coming down to New York 1, there's a 71% probability that we do go false, meaning we break out to the upside of that 7:30 to 8:30 range, and then by the end of the day, we have hit the other side of that range and dug into the overnight session, right? So we're going to hit false and see what that does to everything. Now you can see that London OU, number one, it has a 90% probability, but the primary mode of it getting hit is between 9:30 and 10:15, right? Which is why we use it as a target, right? The P12 mid, right, also has a 95% probability with the secondary mode happening between 9:30 and 9:45. If we had opened up closer to the previous 12-hour midpoint at 6 o'clock, it would have had a higher probability to hit. But since we were extremely above it, this is where this time cluster comes in, right? Looking at the settlement now, we can see that we've increased probabilities of settlement filled, right? Because settlements below that Asia OU, right? There's more of a probability for price to pull it down, right? Looking at the high day, low day situation with that long false, right? We can see that there's a high probability that we make the high of the day between 9:30 and 10:30, and the low of the day between end of day, right? Now there is a scenario, because we can't ignore this mode right here, right? There is a scenario where this long false supports, right, the 2015 low of the day, which would lead us to making a high of the day in the day, right? Out of all 4 scenarios, right, if we go long true, right, that supports that current low of the day at 2015. If we go short true, it does not support that low of the day. It supports the current, well, the current high of the day isn't supported for a short true. But if we go short false, it also supports that low of the day. So data is telling us clear as day that there's a high likelihood that the low of the day is in, right? And our job is to put the puzzle pieces together. Going back to a long false, right? We can make the high of the day, suck back into the range, bounce off of London OU, previous 12-hour mid, and then start trending back up, right? We see that the highest probability for a long false where we pop above, maybe sweep previous day high, suck back into the range, is that the first 3 hours of New York one from 7:30 to 11:30 go down and into the right. However, based off of the width of these medium highs and medium lows, which is based off of the Monte Carlos, right? Um, we can see that there's more likely to be a range during 10 o'clock and pushing that range into 11 o'clock. If we go with the red pill, right, then we're going to see that at 11 o'clock, we'll put that major pivot in for us to head higher if we do want to make that end of day higher day, right? If we get a long true, right, all probabilities drop, right? 70% in Asia, less likely, 64 for that London. P12 mid drops extremely, like you can see from a time, this is 8 o'clock of mid getting hit, it doesn't come back in, right? We can see that settlement, the probabilities all drop dramatic, like for like crazy. I'll stop trying to use big words, right? And then like settlement just completely goes off, like right. So some things that we can see to see if that's going to happen, right? We stay above this P12 high. We can't suck back into the range, right? Or 930, pretend like this is the 930 candle, 1 minute chart, high to low, right? We just rip out of it and we can't return to that. Then that will indicate for a trend day, right? But for now, right, the highest probable long, right, is the peak above previous day high, come back to London OU, and then we either range within this area right here, right? Or, we spend the afternoon session coming back up here to make a new day high or end of day high and then close below this previous day high. Because remember, candle science said there's a 77% chance that we close below here, right? If we get a long true, obviously, right, like we're not going to breach the 730 to 830 low right here. So we bounce off a P12 high, we dig into it, but we don't breach that low. And then the key signature for that will be getting above 930 price and staying above it, right? So that's my war gaming for today. Hopefully it helped. Later, haters.